when I started that business in the basement of my home, I had a negative 10 cents in my account.
Welcome to Beating the Odds, the show about successful minority businesses and the entrepreneurs that created them. Their stories provide inspiration and advice for future minority business owners.
This is Patricia Koski, and on the show today is Felita Poole, an African-American woman who has started and runs a very successful, highly regarded home healthcare agency in Seattle, Washington. Welcome, Felita.
Hello there. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for spending time with us today. We're excited to have you on the show. So, Felita, to start, tell us about your upbringing, including your education and your family.
Originally, I'm from this little small town, which I love, called Leesville, Louisiana. I was reared there, and then I went to Louisiana Tech University. I got my bachelor's degree in English education and speech education, and my master's degree in counseling.
Were any of your family members in business or any entrepreneurs in your family?
You know, not that I know of, and I just say that because I was actually adopted by my great-aunt, great-uncle. The role model that I have of entrepreneurship was this lady at the end of our street who sold Huckabucks. And now Huckabucks are just like frozen Kool-Aid, and then you flip it and you get that juicy, sweet part at the bottom. And I remember that she had a little store, too, and that was my first glimpse of what I would call entrepreneurship.
So what would you say was your earliest childhood ambition?
You know, I came from a community that was very, very close, and everybody believed in just helping each other. Growing up, I just knew that I had to go to college. I knew, that's what my mother always talked about was college. It wasn't like we had the money. There was no trust fund and no funds set aside. You know, there was none of that stuff. But she instilled in me that I had to go to college. So that's all I knew was that wherever that was, I had to go.
Sure. So college was on your radar. When you were younger, did you know that you wanted to be in business? Did you have any interesting business ideas?
I wish I could say, Patricia, I had all these grand ideas about being an entrepreneur and all this. I really didn't. I just knew that there was something great inside of me. And,
sure.
and however you define greatness, it wasn't like I was special or rich. It was just that I knew that there was something inside of me. And my teachers treated me that way. I mean, they pushed me. They believed in me. And I'm a byproduct of that community,
Yeah, definitely, which is very interesting that they picked up on that in you enough to push you, because I'm sure that was really encouraging.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And as I went through high school, I was able to take leadership positions, mm-hmm. and I began to see that you can do things outside of the box and it'll work. And if you treat people right, they'll follow you. And that's one thing that my advisor, his name was Colonel Kitts, he's retired military, taught me was to do right by people and they will follow you. And that's when I began to realize that maybe I really do have something here. Maybe everybody sees something that I don't see, but it may possibly be something there. So for me, it was always about doing right by people so that I could lead them. They say if you build it, they're going to come. And I didn't realize then that I was building something. I just knew that still there was that unction inside of me that says there's something more to you than what you think.
That's really interesting. So you graduate with multiple degrees and you go into counseling. Is this when you came up with your first business idea?
It was when I was in Washington, and I had I was actually an educator. I was working at an alternative school, and I had the opportunity to contract with the state of Washington as a mental health therapist and work with children who were in the foster care system. And so I began to do that. I'd get off from work at 3 o'clock, and I would immediately begin working with kids. I was doing counseling or I was doing tutoring. And so eventually got to the point where I couldn't teach in the daytime and work in the evening because the evening time was taking, I had so many customers, so many clients until I couldn't do both. And I had a wonderful principal as I went to her, and she said to me, you can't chase two rabbits because you're going to lose one. So she blessed me, and she released me. The counseling business was called Inspired by Greatness Counseling Education Center. And the first logo was designed by one of my students. That's still the logo for IBG Counseling and Education Center.
That's such an interesting story. So, you came up with this idea for Inspired by Greatness. How did you even know where to start?
Well, I did a lot of reading, first of all, because I knew I had to get, Department of our state requires, first of all, of course, you had to have your license. Then you have to have the insurance. So I kind of started there. And then I had a mentor, who would kind of guide me along the way, and that was really important, was just that guide.
So was there any capital required on the front end? How did you pay to get your business started?
Well, there was capital, and I laugh about this now because I remember when I started that business in the basement of my home, I had a negative 10 cents in my account. But
right.
What I did was that I had the material already because I was an educator. This was for the tutoring piece of it. And so, I went online, found a contract, made a contract out with this family, and they were actually my first tutoring business. And they would pay me weekly. And I would tutor, I think she had 6 or 7 kids, and I would tutor those kids, and my kids would help to make sure that they were doing the work. So it became a family thing.
Wow.
So eventually, as we, grew and I got more clients on the counseling side, I had to go and open up an office. But by that time, I had enough revenue coming in to where I could sustain a small office.
Right. Wow, that is awesome that you raised the money on your own and funded this whole thing.
That's a really interesting point because a lot of times people think because they don't have the money, they can't do it. But that's not always true. You have to. There are sacrifices that you made. There are sacrifices that I made. Sacrifices my family made. We had to look at what. Yeah. We had to cut out cable for a little bit. But I told them, I said, it's going to get good one day for us. Y'all just hang in there with us. So we as a family made those sacrifices, along the way.
That's such a good way to put it because I think that there's so many entrepreneurs out there who are very intimidated when they don't have the capital up front to necessarily fund it on their own like you were able to. Now a word from one of our sponsors. Sewell Lexus and Cadillac. With dealerships in Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, and New Orleans, Sewell's service is legendary and sets the standard in customer care. Please support Sewell like they support Beating the Odds and minority businesses nationwide. So you said you were, getting clients and then you opened your own office. I mean, how are you getting the word out to get those new clients? Was it word of mouth? Was it marketing?
Well, I think it was word of mouth because I didn't do a lot of marketing because it was a state contract. And so there were social workers who were referring to me. But the word of mouth, I think, got around by the social workers. And I'm telling you, we had an overabundance of clients. There's only so many clients you can take as a mental health therapist. I think it was 22 or 23 is the most you can take. And then from there, we began to do parenting classes for parents who were trying to get their kids back out of the DSHS system. And so those were always full. And there
right.
Again, I go back to the precept that if you build it and you build it right, they're going to come. And I just feel like, the work I did was always built on integrity and respect. And treating people right and making sure people knew they belonged. And I think that's just part of the foundation of it. And then in 2012, we started a home care agency called Hannah's Home Care Agency.
And that's named after your mom, correct?
That's named after my mom. And I did that because, she died back in 1999, but I remember in the community, that's the work that she did. She called that her Christian duty. If somebody needed something, she was there. If they needed to go to the doctor, she'd take them. If they needed a meal cooked, she'd cook it. If their house needed cleaning, she'd clean it. It didn't matter. And so I just thought it's only fitting that we named it after her and in the spirit that she left us, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome. So her civic duty and the heart that she had for people, you were able to turn into a very successful business.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Building upon those values that she and my community taught me. You know, respect, admiration, integrity, compassion, wisdom, you know.
What services does Hannah Home Care offer?
We offer in-home care. So we send out certified nursing assistants or home care aides into the home, and they do, you know, personal hygiene. They do cooking, cleaning. They do medication reminders. They take people to their doctor's appointments. We do 24-hour care. We do living care. We do hourly care.
And then you have a third business, correct?
I do. I have a third service, and it's called Loving Touch, and it's actually under Hannah's, but it's a telecare service. So it's the first telecare service in Washington State. And by telecare, we mean that we're able to reach out to people telephonically and check on them. And you know, what I realize is everyone may not need in-home care, but everyone needs just to be checked on. So they can either opt to get a live call from one of our care specialists, or they can get a telephonic automated call.
Wow. My next question was going to be, you know, how did Loving Touch come to be? Is it because you saw a need that was not currently being met by Hannah Home Care, or is it just kind of the change in technology, or how did this whole thing come about?
Well, one of the things that the adult children were saying was, one thing that I kept hearing them say was, you know, sometimes I forget to call and check on Mom. And as they began to say that, I began to realize, well, maybe there is a need for us to do that. Because as simple as it sounds, sometimes in our lives we're busy doing what's called life. And it doesn't mean we don't care about our loved ones. You know, when you're raising your family and you're working a full-time job, sometimes we forget just to make that call. And that's why we're here, to make that call, and if there's anything that's wrong, we immediately notify the next of kin. And so it just came out of a need, and I just kept hearing people say, you know, I just want to make sure she's okay, because sometimes I forget, and we understood that.
Interesting. That definitely makes sense. So to date, how many employees do you have?
Throughout the life of my business, I've hired hundreds of people. And right now, both businesses combined have 55 employees. Before, at one point, I'd have 85 employees, but I've learned how to carefully, you know, assign job responsibilities, ensuring that we could do more with less people.
Interesting. So you're running pretty lean organizations then.
That's our goal. That's our goal.
Felita, you have quite a success story. Were there any moments where you worried about if this whole thing would actually work out, you know, between IBG, Hannah Home Care, and Loving Touch Care? I mean, were you ever worried, or did you always know that you were going to be this successful?
No, I've had some sleepless nights. You know, I've had some times of wondering if this is where I was supposed to be. Because really, you know, it would be easier if I went back into the school system and I was an educator, I was a teacher, because I didn't have to worry about finances or budgeting or managing employees or having to reprimand employees or having to manage people. I mean, the heartaches and the headaches are there, you know. Right. And so there were some moments where I just said, I really don't know. Those are the moments where it's really, really important that you align yourself with other entrepreneurs. Because I know there were times, Patricia, where I would go to people who were not entrepreneurs, and I'd say, look, this is where I am. Here's what's going on. And they would say things like, girl, why are you there? I wouldn't be doing all that. That's a headache.
Right.
But yet I would go to someone else who was maybe an entrepreneur or maybe had won their businesses before, and they were able to give me a different perspective. And so it was through aligning myself with other entrepreneurs and joining organizations where I realized I can do this.
I'm sure it was interesting to hear all the different advice that you got. So just from a financial perspective, back when you were at IBG and then, with Hannah Home Care and Loving Touch Care, how long did it take you until you were profitable?
So let me say with IBG, it probably took about 2 years before we were actually profitable.
How much annual revenue are your companies currently generating?
With the companies combined, we have made well over $1 million. And we've employed a couple hundred of people through the life cycle of those agencies. In addition to that, we are starting another segment, which we've done before, but we're starting another part for Loving Touch that's called emotional restoration, which is for those who have, those who've maybe just been depleted of their energy, depleted of their self-confidence, whatever it is in life. We get to the point where we stop believing that we can do something. We stop really thinking we can do it, stop knowing. And so this particular class is for that person, and it's called emotional restoration.
So now you're going to have another revenue stream on top of what you already have today,
right?
Which
Absolutely.
is really impressive.
Absolutely. Yeah, because that's the idea, is just to keep building and to have more than one stream, because the average business should have at least 2 to 3 revenue streams, so that if one dries up, you're still going to be able to maintain that business. Yeah.
Has anyone ever approached you to sell the business?
I've had many people approach me about partnering with me. But, I always say, if you can't put on the table what I've put on the table, then we don't really have anything to talk about.
Right.
And so I've had many, like I said, who've talked about wanting to come on board, be a partner, put in some money, and for the home care, I have had someone to talk to me about possibly selling it. And one person that's really close to me said, if I hold out and keep going, I'll sell it for at least $12 million. And I said, I'll hold out. I'll hold out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's incredible. If you ever sold, do you think it would be hard to give up something that you've built up and that, essentially has been your baby?
Yeah, it will. Yeah, it will. Absolutely. Absolutely. Especially once you've birthed it and you've gone through all those pains, and it's hard to give it up. And I'm not looking forward to that. I don't even want to consider that right now. But I know, eventually it will come to that. I'm more excited right now of being able to serve my community and to serve them well.
Definitely.
That's what makes me most excited. And I think that in being an entrepreneur, it's important to keep an eye out on the dollars and to know your budget and to know, your revenue and all, and projected budget, know all of that. But I think it's more important to make sure you're serving your community, whatever it is, the best product possible, or the best service possible is my goal. There's a book that I love called Feel Like an Artist. And basically, I can't remember who wrote it, but basically the author said there's nothing new under the sun. But what we have to do is to study those things that have our attention and find out the weakness of it, and then set out to fill that gap by making up for that weakness in our own product, our own service.
You mentioned earlier several experiences throughout your life where you learned to treat people well. I think that has continued consistently throughout your career. You could leave this all and be successful and go about your life, but the fact that you're still pouring into this today is really
absolutely
telling. Looking back on your career so far, what is the funniest thing that has happened to you, in starting your own companies, or maybe a funny experience that comes to mind?
I remember one client that I had, and she did not want to be in counseling. I mean, she told me she would tear my office up if I didn't let her out. And I was like, I'm not holding you there. Please go. And she, so every week she'd have to come in, and every week she'd tell me how she was going to tear my office up and this and that and this and that. And somehow, and one day, we made a connection. And I don't know how it happened, but somehow, instead of her seeing me as the enemy, she began to see me as an advocate for her. And so as I fast forward now, some 15 years later, this young lady is a mother, and every time I see her, we talk, we hug. I hug her baby. But to me, it was funny because I know how much she hated me. But I always say that, people don't care how much you know until you show them how much you care. And that's the part that touched me, was somehow I was able to reach her heart,
So, again, kind of looking back on your career, were there any fears that you had about starting your own business? And did any of, and what were they? And did any of them prove to be true?
Yeah. Well, the first fear I had was about the money piece, because I would like to have had thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars that I could draw from, because then I could have done so much. I could have done, but I didn't have that. There was a book that I love that's called, oh my goodness, The Power of Broke, and it's by Damon John, who is off of Shark Tank.
Okay.
And sorry about that. I got you. And the book kind of tells you about, as an entrepreneur, how it really is powerful that you don't have all the resources initially that you need. And I think that the part of not having everything that I needed initially is what really taught me about being innovative and about being creative, and about really looking for ways to make it happen. Because if you are determined, you can do it. What you have in your pocket does not define how successful you're going to be. What defines that is the energy that you're willing to put into that dream. And I boast about the fact that I started my business with a negative 10 cents in my bank account.
As you should. That's very impressive.
And was able to do it carefully. Not that I didn't have struggles, not that I didn't have pain. I did. But we made it because we strategically decided each step of the way, here's what we're going to do. Here's what I can sacrifice.
There's just so many different fears out there and misconceptions about being an entrepreneur. And, that's why I think it's so important for you to share your story, because that is something to boast about, negative 10 cents in your bank account.
Absolutely. And I think the other fear was I had a lack of self-confidence. Although I had the education, I had the skills, I had the training, I just lacked the confidence to do it. I mean, people would look at me and say, wow, you're doing it. And I'd be saying to myself, am I?
On that note, when did you finally sit back and realize that you were doing it, that you had made it, and that you had successful business?
I think it was seeing how we were impacting the lives of people. For me, that's when I was realizing that I really can do this. When you're sitting with an elderly person and they're crying and saying, I'm so glad you're here, that's worth to me more than gold. I can't even put a price tag on that. And I just say to my staff, to my employees, we have to make, wherever we are, we have to make it better than what we found.
As an entrepreneur, ambition or talent, which means more to success?
I think you need both of them equally.
Okay.
And I say that because, first of all, ambition to me is that drive to make whatever it is you're doing work. But now you can have that drive, but if you don't have the ability to do it, then it may not be successful. And so I say that drive connected with that talent or that skill or that training is what makes that business successful. Now, here's the other thing is that you may have the ambition, but you may lack the talent. What does that mean? It means you need to go and get trained. You need to go get into a mastermind group or go and go whatever you're looking to do, go and become an expert in it. There's a part where the rubber meets the road and you either have it or you don't have it. And if you evaluate it and you determine that you don't have that skill set, that talent to do what you are ambitiously pursuing, that's when you step back and say, where can I go and get that talent? It may be sitting at the feet of someone else who has that talent, or maybe going back to school or whatever it is. But if that's what you want to do, no one should be able to stop you from pursuing your dream.
What ambitions and goals do you have today?
When I look at, let me just start with Hannah, with my home care, my goal is to grow that into a $1 million business, which, we know that baby boomers and home care is already a $1 billion industry. Mm-hmm. So we're adding on more products, more services to better serve our community based upon the needs that we hear. But also, I miss teaching. I love teaching, and that's where the emotional restoration, which is going to be a live stream program, is going to come into play. And that's what starts August 1st, as I begin teaching about emotional restoration from my lessons learned and the many different countries I've traveled and the places I've worked and taught, as I pour out into you what has been poured into me. I'm in the process of writing a book. So it just kind of goes on and on because I really want to share my life, my lessons. If there's anything somebody can glean from my life, then I'm transparent. And I want to talk about those struggles and those heartaches and those, those triumphs. I want to be transparent, but I want to encourage that person who wants to be a business owner, an entrepreneur, to pursue it.
I agree. I'll read your book. So if your 25-year-old self could see you now, what would she think?
She would say, wow. She would say, you're doing it. And she would still say, though, to remember where you came from. Never forget those people who allowed you to stand on their shoulders so that you could stand tall. And every year, I go back to my hometown. Every year, my church there has an annual Family and Friends Day. And I get to go back and I get to have a little booth set up and we do health stuff. And I get to give back to my community because I don't ever want to forget where I came from. I don't want to forget those people that helped me because I want to be that kind of help to somebody else. Those educators in my community who wouldn't allow me to stop. Those educators who, put in toward my education. The pastors that prayed for me, the sisters on my street that helped me, my classmates. I don't ever want to forget those people, as we never should.
Well, Felita, you've built a career on giving back, and I have no doubt that you will continue giving back for the rest of your life. You are quite an inspiration. So a couple more questions for you. If you're giving advice to an aspiring entrepreneur right now, what is the biggest challenge that they're going to face?
I think the biggest challenge is really knowing what you want to do. A lot of times as entrepreneurs, we're all over the place. In any given minute, we have many, many, many ideas going. To be able to focus on an idea and to develop that idea, and to become an expert with that and then to move on is the best advice I could give you, is to get focused first. And you build your media, you build, whatever it is, your live stream or what have you, you build it, and then you move on to something else.
Are there any specific challenges that you faced as a minority entrepreneur that others may not face?
For me, I knew how to do the skill. I knew the craft, but I lacked the financial training. I knew how to kind of budget here or there, but as far as all those numbers and stuff, I didn't know. But I think that when you lack a particular aspect, then you find somebody who has that skill. And so I brought on board, of course, a bookkeeper, an accountant, all those people that had the skills that I needed to make sure that I was hitting, what I needed to, that my bottom line was right. And some of the best advice that someone has given me is hire people who are not like you.
Well, Felita, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for sharing your inspiring story with all of our listeners. Before we go, for our listeners, how can we begin using your services on social media, or what is your website?
So my website is hannahhomecare.net. That's HANNAH, homecare.net. So that's one. The other website is lovingtouchcare.com. And under that also is our class that starts August 1 that's called Emotional Restoration. And it's for those who, have just kind of been beat down by life, and you're looking to be re-energized. You're looking at, where do I start? I know I got greatness inside of me, but, I don't know how to begin. And this course is for you. So if you go to lovingtouchcare.com, you'll see where you're able to sign up for that class, and also we're going to be taking pre-orders for the book beginning September 1. So we have the live streaming class coming up, and we have an ebook coming up. So we have a lot of good things coming up where I'd like to pour into other people in our community, entrepreneurs, or just people who just want to do so much more than what they're doing. These services are for you.
Well, thank you so much, Felita. Like you heard it here, folks, go visit hannahhomecare.net and lovingtouchcare.com and get connected. Thanks for listening. Now we want to ask you a favor. If you know of a minority business owner with a great inspirational success story, we would love to have them on the show. Please send an email to podcast@hiddenstar.org, and we will be right back in touch. It is important that we get these stories out there, and we appreciate your help in letting us know about them. Let me take a minute to talk about one of our great sponsors. Hidden Star is a national nonprofit that helps minority entrepreneurs start and grow their own businesses. It has been called the best new concept in minority business in the last 50 years, and they are proud to bring Beating the Odds podcast to you. Check them out at hiddenstar.org.